And now for a conversation about the global economy, please welcome Chairman and CEO of JPMorgan Chase, Jamie Dimon. Here to lead the conversation is The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg.
Thank you. Good morning. Nice to see all of you again. And again, it's been a great program so far, and we're going to continue having a great program with Jamie Dimon. Thank you very much for being here at the Atlantic Festival. We appreciate it. I don't want to talk about Fed rates for very long because my knowledge base will be exhausted in
it's also really boring.
2.5 minutes, and it's also incredibly boring. Yeah. But I do want to ask you what you think of the rate cut, and if you think the rate cut is going to have some sort of possibly dramatic impact on the election in 47 days.
Yeah, so first of all, thrilled to be here, and thank you for spending time with me. Look, I think it's a minor kind of thing, okay? It's a lot of chatter, a lot more talk and hot breath. They did it. I think they should have, 50 basis points. Hopefully we're on the way to a soft landing. I wouldn't count my eggs. And I think this one particular thing, all things being equal, has almost no effect on the election.
No effect?
No effect.
No effect.
I think most Americans, literally, there's 320 million Americans, and if you probably surveyed them, only 5% would know about it.
And there won't be, you won't feel the impact before the election.
You've already had, like, mortgage rates, you've already had that come down a little bit. But that had actually happened prior to the rate cut.
Right. Talk a little bit about inflation and if you believe it's definitively over, and talk about your possible worries about recession coming. Yeah.
So I know we're going to talk about geopolitics. I think that's far more important than soft landing, mild hard landing, things like that, and recession. Look,
you're editing me already?
A little bit, yeah.
All right.
No, we don't know. And I think people spend too much time on short-term data and guessing the future. Most people can't guess it. The economy is enormously complex. 160 million people go to work every day. They worry about their families and their friends. Trillions of dollars moves around the world. Investments move all over the place. That's the economy. The Fed changes rates, but underneath that, there's an economy which is getting stronger, getting weaker. I hope we have a soft landing. I'm a little more skeptical than other people. I give it lower odds, but I hope it's true. And I also am a little more skeptical that inflation is going to go away so easily. Not because it hasn't come down, it has, and it can come down more, it might, but because there's a lot of things in the future which are inflationary, okay? And I'm not talking about next year, but the deficits are huge, those are inflationary. The green economy is inflationary. The remilitarization of the world is inflationary. The restructuring of global trade is inflationary. Demographics is inflationary. I don't see the massive offsets to that. So we may have gone from a lower rate, lower inflation, to a slightly higher rate, higher inflation down the road. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it. Economies are used to dealing with that. It's not a disaster. It's just, it's just different than we had in the past.
How much power does a president have over the direction of the economy, actually?
If you look at it in the short run, almost none. So people have studied this. When a president's elected, what happens to the economy in the next 12 months? The economy is like a tanker. It's going, and it's not going to change. But they do have an effect in a longer period. So policy really matters. So when you look at that, you got to look at the more long run. So you do want presidents who have policy that's conducive to growth, and so it doesn't matter in the short run, but probably not the long run. This may be an exception. So just because what I said is true doesn't mean it's true this time. I don't know this time. I think this time it may be more consequential in the short run.
I want to get to America's place in the world as quickly as possible, but I do want to introduce it by talking about the upcoming race. You recently said something that was controversial, at least controversial in certain circles, where you said that Trump was, quote, kind of right about immigration and kind of right about NATO. You could pick either one and address it first, immigration and NATO.
But my point is, but I still feel 74 million people voted for him. And there's a lot of gaslighting and scapegoating and stuff like that. And people impugn why they did it. You shouldn't do that. And I think what I was trying to make the point is I don't think we should be insulting any of our citizens at all, though I obviously don't like certain things, but that immigration was a problem. I don't like how he dealt with it, but it was a problem. He acknowledged it. China was a problem. There was a shift in policy. He acknowledged it. The economy grew. He reduced regulations. He was pro-business. There are reasons why people voted for him, which aren't because of his character. And so I was just making that point. That's all I'm saying. I still feel that way. You got to I think you should treat all citizens with respect. And if you're running for somebody, try to get their votes. At least try to understand why they're voting for that person.
You're referring to, and you've talked about this in the past, the mistake of referring to Trump voters as deplorable, for instance, or other kind of broad stroke. What's your anxiety about that? Just that it's demonization?
Yes, I think it is demonization. I think people should stop it, whether you're on the left or the right, and it leads to bad outcomes. If you could travel around the country, people feel very differently about some of these policies. And one of your guys, James Fowler, wrote the book. We went to 50 small cities, and I do bus trips every year. And this year we're in Seattle and Omaha and Bentonville, St. Louis. And there's innovation, people working together. They're not obsessed with everything people are obsessed with in New York City, San Francisco, and DC. And they're working together. And they're not angry at each other. They're building parks, and they're trying to get jobs in place, and they're trying to help the local community. So I just think it's a better attitude, collaboration, help people, try to make things better. I just saw Governor Whitmer, try to make Detroit better. You're not going to make these cities better if you yell at each other. And Mayor Duggan, who did a great job there, the governor did a great job there. They bring in business, not-for-profit, civic society, government, and they try to attack the problems. The problems are homeless, streets, crime, schools, jobs, health. And those are problems. Those problems are not Democrat or Republican. And I don't think people should be weaponized by those types of things. They should try to look at the problems and come up with a policy that actually works.
Let me ask you this about something you said, that Trump was good for business. One of your roles, the role of any CEO of a large company, a large bank especially, is to think about tail risk, right? Isn't it risky to have a president of the United States, risky to business, among other things, who doesn't adhere to democratic norms? I mean, doesn't the world look at us and think, wow, if they're so unstable as to have a January 6th event, maybe that's not great for business?
I'm not going to comment about very specific things like that. He was pro-business, and it was good for business. Yes, there are risks to all the things that happen for any kind of president. So I agree with that concept. And we look at all fat tails, trying to make sure we can handle all of them. And we're not going to elect the president. You guys are going to elect the president, and we have to deal with this as a business. And my view is always serve your client through all of that. I have to deal with all of that. But yes, that his views and stuff may create more uncertainty in the world. And I travel the whole world, by the way, and I get to hear from business around the world and presidents and prime ministers what they think about specific issues. And sometimes I share that when I come back with people here. But
you have a I don't want to say apocalyptic view of where we're heading. It's not apocalyptic at all. But you have expressed this publicly, that you're very worried about the direction we're taking, mainly because of polarization, but not only because of polarization. If you had to identify the 3 or 4 undercurrents that worry you the most, could you lay that out?
My view is not apocalyptic, but you're talking about geopolitics.
Well, no, I'm just talking about...
I don't think America's apocalyptic, because I think America's hugely resilient. It's innovation, it's growing, it's a blessed land, with food, water, energy, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise. That's still true. It's still true everywhere. And if you opened up our borders to the whole world, 4 billion people would come here. I don't like the demonization of America. I think we could acknowledge our flaws, but also celebrate the beauty of this country, which most people who don't live here understand. And they believe they would come here if they could. So I don't have any popular view of the United States. I always want leadership which is mature and decent. I've written about this in the Washington Post. That you talk to each other.
I'm not familiar with that publication. I'm sorry. I'll look it up.
I would have put in the Atlantic too if I could, but
one day you'll graduate. Yeah. But go into this a little bit. But first of all, start back a little bit. You're the grandson of immigrants, not even high school educated.
Greek immigrant, mostly Greek. Yeah.
Talk about what it is that you think, because we do have this crisis of confidence and purpose in this country that spans parties. Talk about what it is that makes you optimistic about not only the idea of America, but how we're functioning. Because this piece in that aforementioned newspaper was a warning. I mean, it was a warning about dysfunction.
It was a warning about more about geopolitics and what we need to do here to help the world stay safe and free for democracy. And so the country, if you travel the world, you don't have what we have here. And we got food, water, energy, the Atlantic, the Pacific, great neighbors, and we should treat them respectfully in Mexico and Canada. Okay, then we've got the gifts of our founding fathers: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of enterprise. And the value of freedom is extraordinary. The arguments, ideas, generation. You look at all these autocratic nations, that's what they fall down on. They can't talk, the boss wants X, they can't innovate. You guys can buy what you want, move what you want, do what you want, say what you want. You can't do that in a lot of countries. And so this is the safest nation on the planet, and it's a very moral nation. And now, we have flaws. I've always acknowledged them, like we've done a terrible job for the 20% lower income in our society. They're dying younger. They go to crime-ridden neighborhoods. When I listen to all my liberal friends talk about it, I acknowledge this. But their schools aren't graduating their kids. They're dying 10 years younger. Their incomes didn't go up for 20 years. How the hell did that happen in America? We did a terrible job. And, and I go through immigration and taxation and regulation and healthcare and pensions. We screwed up. But no, we don't admit it. So I'm not saying we're perfect, but the good stuff is unbelievable. My grandparents came. This country was a beacon of freedom and light, and what these people do to get here is extraordinary.
Why did they come?
It was World War I. They wanted to escape. There was poverty. They couldn't get opportunity, so they came to the land of opportunity. But it's like a lot of your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. That's what they did. And I think we've got to teach our own people here what that stands for: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise. The actual freedoms you have are extraordinary. If you don't believe me, take a trip to me with parts of the world. Where people can't say what they want. You don't have freedom of the press, really. You can't really do things or buy things. There's a lot of caste societies. People are afraid. There's much more rampant crime. So we should celebrate that and start fixing our problems. I think some of those problems, by the way, cause the populism. And if you go and if you travel to inner cities, which I go to, and rural areas I go to, you'll hear their view of it. And they don't think everything Washington's doing is fixing it. And they think that actually it didn't help them. And that Washington's giving a lot of gifts out to their family and friends. And so we have to be a little more respectful of what didn't work here. Like if your kids were going to schools where even if they graduated, they had to go, I don't want to say it's bad, stock shelves, when they could have had a job making $60,000 a year as a coder or planner or finance person or program management, because we don't educate them about livelihood. We worry about whether you can do math in 8th grade, which I think is good, but I think we should change the purpose of education. You leave learning about life and you have a livelihood. And that should be true for high schools, that should be true for community colleges. And in those high schools, we should teach nutrition and wellness, which we don't, and we should teach financial education, like saving money. And so my view about America is the greatest country in the world, but I do talk about the problems that we should fix. Forget all the mistakes, don't forget them, but let's go, what are we going to do going forward that makes it better? And so,
how did, from your perspective, how did Washington go off the rails? What were the mechanisms that created the dysfunction that keep these problems from being solved here?
Look, I don't know really, and we've always had this. When you look at our democracy, there have been terrible times of democracy. You had Joe McCarthy. You had our Civil War. You had all these terrible things. You also had leaders who come forward and take us forward. I personally believe one of the main drivers is the bottom 25% of society were in fact left behind. When they're dying 10 years longer, they're going to crime-ridden neighborhoods, being lectured to by New Yorkers in San Francisco and Washington, D.C., and their schools aren't working, their health care is worse. I think that caused it. I call it the fraying of the American dream. They didn't have the same opportunity. And they did see a lot of the world get very rich. And so, yeah, they're a little pissed off. And I think that caused various types of populism, both the left and the right, by the way.
You've mentioned this twice, this San Francisco, Washington, and New York, and the lectures. Give us, what are people hearing from these cities that they don't like, and what are people in these cities doing that's wrong?
It was the quotes, where they're hanging on to their beers, their Bible, and their guns. Really? Is that okay? Of course it's okay. Deplorables, because they think differently. So, the disrespect they feel when you go to some of these places from, the elite, and it's that kind of thing. And so, it's a general thing. I'm not sure it's the reason we have populism, but it's been going on for a long time. But I think the real reason is we left them behind. We left them behind. Most of you don't even drive through their part of town. You don't even know what it looks like. And, so company like JPMorgan, we have community branches in Harlem and Crenshaw and South Side of Chicago, and they're enormously productive. People like it. They actually go, and we try to relate to the community. There are fixes. You can list any problem, there are fixes. And we spend very little time talking about policies that work, why they work. You can look around the world and find health policies, pension policies, education policies that actually worked. And then you can look at ours, and they actually didn't. And very often we laugh at it. It takes 12 years to rebuild a broken bridge. I don't think it's funny. It should take 2. And how did that happen? Bureaucracy, complacency, stultifying rules and regulations. And so we better get fixing it because we could make it worse. And I think, and again, I'm optimistic. I think we will fix it, but it's going to take a lot of elbow grease.
How would you actually fix it? I mean, I know you're not launching your candidacy for the presidency on the stage, but how would you actually fix it?
Well, look, my role at JPMorgan, and what we try to do is, so we do things as JPMorgan to help communities, the black community, the Hispanic community. We help the rich community. We help countries and sovereign wealth.
The rich community.
We reach out to, we bank everybody. And so it's important that we do that. And we do work skills. We hire disabled. We hire vets. We hire neurologically disabled. We hire autistic. We hire second chance citizens. We have school programs. We do a lot of great stuff. But the most important thing is policy at the federal level. And I think at the state level. So that James Fallow book is like very local policies. They work. Detroit, it works. But the federal policy is more important. If they can get education policy, pension policy, healthcare, immigration, if we can get those policies right, mortgages, affordable housing, that will do more than individual companies attacking these problems. So we spend a lot of time on actual policy. What affordable housing policies work? What mortgage policies work? What education policies work? And then we're willing to get in the fight on immigration. If it ever comes in front of Congress, we all want to get a real immigration laws out there that work, including the one that was recently not done. But so we try to get involved in the fight. It's very frustrating.
But I don't think anybody would disagree with you that better policies would lead to better outcomes. But the question is, there's a chasm right now between what you're saying should be done and the seeming ability of Washington to do it. So let's peer into that. Have you peer into that chasm for a minute and say, all right, how do you get politicians, or how do you build a political system that gets the politicians that would actually work on these problems?
There are a lot of politicians, Democrat, Republican, Senator, Congress folks, they're good. They want to answer this. They want to fix it. It's a little controlled out there by other things. So to me, I don't know what to do. I don't know the fix except to give it elbow grease. I'm not the kind of person who throws my hands up and says, I'm not going to do it. I think we need to get involved. I think business need to get involved. Civic society needs to get involved. People to talk to people. I talk to the unions. I talk to the left. I talk to the right. That's how, it's the only way I know. If you look at our best leaders, in life, Abe Lincoln, Eisenhower, Clinton, that's what they did. And yes, they still had democracy's tough. It's just better than all other forms, So,
you believe that Bill Clinton was the last president, if I'm not mistaken, who actually was effective in a centrist, bipartisan way. Is that fair?
I would say it's an overstatement. I think that George Bush was effective in some ways that way, and Obama was effective in some ways that way. I think Biden was effective in some ways that way. Trump, there are probably examples too. So it's not a binary thing. I do think that in the Ike Eisenhower book, and I wrote about this in the Washington Post, that he made it a point.
Thank you very much for coming. We're going to see you at the...
But I'm going to talk about the press in a second. So that he made it a point.
Well, I'm looking forward to that.
He made it a point to meet with the opposition leaders. It was written by his daughter. It's called How Ike Led. It was weekly or bi-weekly for lunch or dinner. I think every president should do that. I mean, I don't know how you could be president. You're elected president for the people of the United States, and you don't sit down with the other side. What's in your mind? Why do you believe that?
Let me ask you.
We have the same value. I mean, we have a lot of the same values. We want to get more jobs and get people healthier, and And it doesn't matter whether you like them or not. It doesn't matter whether you like their views or not.
But something's changed in politics, though. You're not grappling with the. I'll give you an example. So famously, aides to President Obama went to him at a certain point and said, you know, what you should really do is you should really have Mitch McConnell over for a drink. And Obama turned and said, no, you have a drink with Mitch McConnell. You know, like, I don't know. But Mitch McConnell stated publicly, to be fair to President Obama, he said that his number one goal was not to build policies, economic policies or health policies. Number one goal was to defeat Barack Obama. So this sounds like very
I find it unbelievable that you actually think that has any meaning whatsoever.
No.
For the Senate leader to say, my goal is to beat the other party, well, of course that's their goal. But the Giants want to beat the Jets.
No.
It makes no difference.
McConnell was saying that I will subvert legislative efforts that I agree with.
Whatever it is, I would have met with the guy. I don't care what he says or how he says. That's me. So you all can do what you want. The next president can do whatever they want. I would meet with the guy, and I do it all the time. That's what I would do. And so, you know, I remember there's a famous story where they were impeaching Clinton. Some of his legislative folks didn't want to go to the Hill. They're impeaching you, Mr. President. And Clinton said to them, go to the Hill and get it done. That's what you do. You have a job to do. It doesn't matter whether your feelings are hurt. And so I just feel differently about that. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe it's impossible. But I think it's very important for all of us that you do that. And so I have an idea for the press. Ready?
No.
I may do this myself when I have time, okay? I'm going to call it like a day 2 press thing, where, you know, right now when you read about in the press, you know, and we need a free and open press, and I never get mad at them I do call them up and tell them they were stupid sometimes, but it's the day 2 thing. So we read about student lending, you read about IRS. We need $80 billion for the IRS. We need $80 billion. They want it. We got it rich. I'm like, really? Like, they never even mention how much we already spend in the IRS, whether it's effective, what policies would change. So running a business, very often if you ask me for more money, my first question would be, yeah, what do you do with the money you already got? Because usually there's bureaucracy, complacency, stupidity, regulations that make it ineffective, and you never read it. Like student lending, you know, we're constantly lending out money. We're going to lose $500 billion. You know, and I understand that people who were mistreated should be given some debt forgiveness, but that should be described to you, not just everybody. A lot of people got, you know, this is the money that's going, 30% of society goes to college. They got what they want. They got much higher incomes, and this forgiveness is like something we need to do. Well, most of us graduated with student loans. We should look at what we're doing, change the policies, and forgive the people who, which by the way, mostly, because we've looked at this, for-profit colleges.
So the idea
where they didn't graduate.
The idea is context, like
context, detail, analysis, fairness, explain it to the people, and so.
No. Look, yeah. I couldn't agree with you more.
Day 2 would continue, would ask the next round of questions. Take the time, and it could be like a long form. Take the time to go through the whole thing, not break news, not so-and-so said X today, and then, you know, so-and-so said X, and then this, and you think that you're doing a good press because then you say, okay, get someone who agrees with it and get someone who disagrees with it. Who cares? Is it right or is it wrong? What makes it right or wrong? So I'm a nerd about that. Go get the details.
No. And it's great, and I think modestly that the Atlantic does that.
You do.
But what I would say, and this is I think of it as the tragedy of metrics. Unfortunately now, because we can see what people are interested in, I will tell you that, and this is not a defense of the press, I will tell you that the readership and the viewership for detailed policy discussions is not what you may think it is. And we have, I mean, obviously we do it anyway. There are a high number of quality publications that do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. But getting Americans to stop looking at TikTok and Instagram to get their information and actually spend 10, 15, 20 minutes reading about the earned income tax credit, which is extraordinarily important, but sounds extraordinarily boring. It's very difficult.
So I wouldn't try to do the day 2 thing with everybody. I would have a quality publication that will appeal to the people who want to appeal it. It should be policymakers, influencers, some senators, some congressmen, and it would be enormously influential in policy, and it would probably make money. You could probably charge a lot for it because there are a lot of stuff that we pay for in research for the detail analysis. We'll pay $30,000 a year. You know, we're not paying $799 a year. You know, $79, something like that. There is a place for it. JPMorgan spends $1 billion a year in research. Real detailed research and analysis does actually work, but it isn't trying to sell the paper. But it'll inform the public, and people. You have a lot of think tanks who do some of that in reality, but they often get hijacked by board members and whatever.
Look, I'm going to give you an opportunity right now to make some money, and I will say that I think it's a great idea, and I think you should write a weekly or monthly column for The Atlantic, going through, pick an issue and just write it. I can pay in the low to mid 3 figures per column. But you're not doing. It's your way of giving back. No, and I'm serious. That would be. I think people here would read that.
But it's just when I wrote the op-ed, thank you. But okay, well, if you want, I write a chairman's letter, and the last 20 pages, it's 60 pages long about the company and issues and AI and products and the good, the bad, the ugly of the company. But the last 20 pages is public policy, global policy, public policy. And if you want, may put you to sleep, get that. It has a lot of detail in it, and there's a lot of research that supports what I put in there. So.
Okay, but anyway, you'll file a column next week, and we'll see how it goes.
Here's an amazing thing. Here's another thing. When I wrote the Washington Post thing, I start by saying we need comprehensive policy and stuff like that. I'd originally give it to the New York Times, and when they read it, it was like, well, it's too complex. I said, but the point I'm making is we need comprehensive, coordinated policy, and you're saying take one little thing out of that and write about just that. I was like, well, fine, I won't write it to the New York Times, so that's why next time I'll call you. But my point is, comprehensive policy may be complicated. It is necessary. And so, to me, that is important. We get these things right. And like I said, we can fix all of these things.
Let's spend the remaining time we have on the world.
Right.
The biggest worries you have about America's place in the world, does it have to do with the rise of authoritarian regimes?
No, it has to do with in February of 2022, Russia sent 300,000 troops and thousands of tanks into a free and democratic European nation. They're now, and at the time I said this is bad because this is not something we've seen since World War II. Under the threat of nuclear blackmail, clearly you now have working hand in hand with Iran and North Korea. Then you had the vicious attacks in Israel, working in hand with Iran and North Korea. And now you have this, it's not even evil access, and I'll talk about China in a second because I wouldn't put them quite there, but coordinated activity between the Houthis, Hezbollah, Iran, Russia, and they are literally trying to tear down the Western world that was set up, the rule of law that was set up after World War II, aided and abetted by some other autocratic nations, and China isn't part of that, but they are aiding and abetting it. And as long as they're there, we have a very complex relationship. So these wars, I hope they'll eventually end up in some kind of armistice or settlement, hopefully in the interest of the people of Ukraine and Israel, with some kind of peace and security for both. But this battle can go on for a lot longer. And it's more of an economic battle of trade, influence, innovation, technology, et cetera. And they have said they want, that America's abused its position in the Western world, which we have a little bit, by the way, I won't go through here, and that we need to understand this is about the freedom, the safety of the freedom and democracy in the world for the next 100 years. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not ringing the alarm. But this decision we may accomplish that or fail in the next 10 years. And I don't want to see a book written 20 years from now saying how the West lost, that we got divided on economic issues, we didn't support allies when it was necessary, the autocratic nations, deliberately over an extended period of time try to nick away at American economic alliances, trade alliances, that we have done a terrible job in development finance. Think of what we're not doing in Africa and what we're not doing in Latin America. China is all over Latin America today and Africa today. We better get our act together. And, even America doesn't have a divine right to success. We are being challenged right now heavily, militarily and economically around the world. And I'm hoping that we take it that seriously.
What would you do to ensure that America's deterrence power remains overwhelming or becomes overwhelming again?
Yeah, there are fundamentals here, okay? This is where I say it's got to be comprehensive because one alone doesn't work. We have to have the strongest military in the world. And unfortunately, we're going to have to spend more. So I would be a little bit more like a Ronald Reagan here. If you guys spend another $100 billion more, we are going to spend $100 billion more. And that's the first thing when your adversary sees something that you're not going to sit back and be worried about it, that it minimizes the chance you actually have a war or something like that. The foundation for everything we do, and so America's got the money, the military, the morality. People trust us around the world. They're mad at us for the misuse of sanctions and the dollar and some of the wars which might have been unnecessary, but they still trust America. If we reach out a hand to most of these nations, they'd rather take our hand than Russia's or China's. And we should understand that, but we got to treat them respectfully to do that. That's more diplomacy, economic relations, et cetera. But the foundation to all of it is our own economy. So I've already spoken about the things we got to do to improve our economy. I think we have to teach civics. I think we have to fix the bottom.
How do you teach civics when there's so much polarization about what even the meaning of America is? They don't teach
in school. I mean, I've been asking your parents, if you're a parent here, go look at the curriculum they're teaching in the school. Go look at it. And most of the parents who do that tell me, American history is not on it. And I think it should be on it. It could talk about the bad part of American history, but it should also talk about freedom of speech, and freedom of religion, and the founding fathers, and the extraordinary privileges that Americans have. And then we got to fix the bottom 20% because they should benefit from this too. So it's hard. We got to do all those things, and you have to remember I think the only one who can lead the world is America. It isn't like there's a replacement. If it's not us, you have a system that goes back to like Europe in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s. It's kind of a little bit of chaos as you have shifting alliances all over the place and shifting economic alliances. Every nation, if you go to any nation around the world, they've got their own national security interest. So for us, it's X, which what it is. But for Germany, it's they need cheaper energy, which they really should get from us. So that's like I talked about comprehensive policy. When we delayed those LNG things, which is a little bit of virtual signaling to the climate, having LNG go to Germany has 3 virtues. It's great economically for America. It ties them into an ally they can trust for safe and affordable and secure energy, and it's good for CO2 because replacing gas, if they don't do that, all these countries go back to coal. So it has all these benefits, and we didn't do it because we're virtual signaling. And so it's doable, and like I said, America is the only one who can actually really do it, and I think we have to get organized and realize we're in this comprehensive battlefield and start to coordinate and organize. And you should know that China already does the coordination. They're already doing all this, okay? Where they're laying ground, where they're laying people, where they're putting people, how they're supporting nations, how they're building their bridges, how they're putting their technology in certain countries. They're already doing it. They've already got a 20-year plan. We're like, you wake up in the morning, you want to have your beer and go do what you want to do. We need to be a little more thoughtful. And so
China does that because it has one guy who makes the rules.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, and we're never going to have a system like that. We're too consultative. But let me ask you this one.
But we did. Like for World War II, we did.
Right.
FDR did. Truman, Eisenhower, Nixon, Carter, Reagan, they did it for...
There was the clarity of the Cold War.
Exactly. And now we have the clarity of this, which we should explain to people. And I also, by the way, make Washington, D.C. go back to work. I can't believe when I come down here, the empty buildings. I mean, the people who work for you are not going to the office anymore. That bothers me. I mean, I don't allow that JP.
Well, we know what he would do on day one as president.
Yeah. They're all going back to work.
Let me ask you this one final question, and prompted by something that you said. You talk about the need for American leadership and engagement, not only on military, but on development spending and trade and everything. There are a lot of people in the Republican Party who are soft isolationist in intention or belief. Then you said that we need to spend $100 billion more on the military. There are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who don't believe that at all and would oppose any increases in defense spending. You're in the middle. You're a centrist. Would this country be better served by having a powerful centrist party at this point?
Look, I don't know that when you say centrist, you're still putting people in a bucket. I'm different than other people. I'm trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. I'm not talking about what works for Democrats, centrists, or Republicans. I'm simply trying to talk about what actually works. But I think people bridging the gap, yes. If that's what you mean by centrist, absolutely. If you mean people trying to understand, what they need to compromise to make the next step, absolutely. Democracy by its nature is compromise. That is what democracy is. So when people say, we're not compromising, I'm like, really? That's what democracy is. The majority kind of gets its way, but not all the time. And then but you're right. If we have 2 left and 2 right, then we have flip-flopping policies. That makes it hard for everybody. Like, if you think about business, things conducive to actually growing an economy, consistent policies, fair policies, neutral tax policies, as opposed to tax policies which are favoring all these various different things. And so, yeah, reaching across it would be a great thing. Collaboration is a great thing.
Jamie, well, I want to thank the current CEO of JPMorgan Chase and future Atlantic columnist, Jamie Dimon, for joining us today. Thank you very much. Thank you.